Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Bart from Drone Radio Live. Also, you might know me from multi-rotorforums.com. And I'm here tonight live in our studio in scenic Clinton, New Jersey to talk to you about the new release from Hobbyco. This is the latest version of the RealFlight flight simulator software. It's called RealFlight Drone. Now, they've released this. It's very similar in how it functions to the other RealFlight products, the most recent being RealFlight 7.5. But we're going to talk about RealFlight Drone tonight. We're going to open the box, show you what's inside. We're going to install it on one of the computers that we've got here, and we're going to go through the features as we discuss a few other things. So tonight's format, just to give you a quick overview as to how we're going to do this. The last show we did last week went fairly well. The equipment that we have set up here overall worked the way we would have expected it to. But we did have some glitches. We had some audio problems during the show. We had some problems with the stream. Although I should note the World Series, which was the same night, also had streaming problems. Their live feed crashed for 6 minutes, so I don't feel quite as bad after hearing that. But I'm here in the studio by myself tonight. I'm doing this as another run-through with the equipment. I'll be switching the cameras myself. That's why I'm sitting here at the control station. For the studio, the backdrop is stuff that you normally wouldn't have in view, but I wasn't going to redo the whole setup. We have sound editing equipment over a door that's behind me, or not equipment, but moving blankets over a door that's behind me so we can't hear any hallway noise. There's other things in storage back here. But we have the cameras turned around. This isn't going to be the normal format, but this was the best way to do another test of the system. I didn't feel comfortable inviting guests to the show that might not have the time or the inclination to play along with more technical problems. So rather than have the next show be another experiment, I wanted to do this tonight. The people at Hobbyco sent camera switch, RealFlight Drone for us to review. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to go ahead, test the studio equipment one more time, get the stream going live, and at the same time talk about a product. So what we have set up here, we have two laptops, and I can show you those real quick. One is going to be our Skype feed, if anybody would like to call. It's set up to receive phone calls or Skype calls. The ID is Drone Radio Live 2, okay? And that's because we have two Skype feeds for the studio. The other computer is set up here, and this one is going to be where we install the software. We're going to install the software in real time as I'm talking to you, and we're going to also take a look at the website, all in real time live as I'm sitting here talking to you. So if you have questions, if you see me doing something and you say, well, what was that you just did, call on Skype. We'll take your questions live as we're doing the product review. This is one of the great things about having your own studio set up to do live streaming feeds to the internet. You could do just about anything you want. It's very interactive, and hopefully we'll all take advantage of this in the coming months, maybe years. And just to answer your question, camera change, the box doesn't really have the quotes on the word drone. I added those because, with Drone Radio Live. Anyway. All right, so moving right along, here's the unboxing part. I don't generally love unboxing videos, but we're going to do it anyway. The box, you can see, very professional presentation. Has a nice helicopter sitting there on the cover, a multi-rotor helicopter. And if you open the front of the box, you see that with this software, you get a variety of different helicopters to fly. There's a Dead Cat Quad in there. There are what look like TBS Discovery style quads. There's an octocopter. The gist of the software is that it gives you the ability to not just learn to fly, but to also manipulate the camera. So this definitely has a slant towards aerial photography, aerial video. But if you read through, it also talks about refining flying skills. It talks about there's a scavenger hunt feature built into this, so that's less obvious, but it is geared towards FPV as well. It has different functionalities, and we're going to explore all those in the next hour or so. Okay, so here's the box. It looks good. Okay, you open up the box. Now this is the version that includes the Interlink controller. and that's RealFlight's controller that they've been including with their flight simulators for years. I had RealFlight version 3 upgraded to 3.5, the free upgrade, and that had an interlink controller, which a friend of my son is now using. I've got RealFlight 7.5 at home. I use that with my high-tech Aurora 9 controller. That works great. The people at Hobbyco sent the version along that has the controller, and that's amply protected in this styrofoam container. I know people like those details. So I've already had this out of the box once, so this is an unboxing video, but I have had it out of the box. I actually installed it just to make sure everything would go fine on these new laptops that I picked up. And along with the controller comes a trainer cable. So you can use your controller and then hook it up to another RC controller if you have one that uses these connectors. This square type connector is, if you can see that, I can switch back to this one. It's a little clunky with me switching cameras, but that's how we're going to get through this tonight, so just bear with me. This square connector, you can see, is typical for the back of a Futaba radio. I believe this looks like a 1/8 inch, 3.5 millimeter connector. I believe that's high-tech uses that, maybe JR also. Okay, so you could hook up a buddy box, which means one person flies with this box, the other person flies with the other one, and you can turn off, you can grant them control or take it back, depending on if they're doing okay or if they're about to crash. Also, this came from, I'll give you a nice up close of that. That looks pretty nice, right? It's got switches and knobs, and this is common with the RealFlight 7.5 version. So you can use these switches for bomb drops, to turn smoke on and off, flaps, retractable landing gear, all those different features that airplanes and more advanced helicopters wouldn't have some of that stuff. Airplanes would. But this controller gives you the functionality to control camera stuff, to control helicopter stuff, and the buttons on the front here, this up and down toggle button, as well as this mode select and cancel button, those allow you to control the software in the computer right from your controller, which is pretty handy. Older versions of this controller didn't have that. So anyway, moving right along, we're going to install the software, and as it's installing, if it takes very long, we're going to talk about some basic helicopter stuff, because if you're watching this, chances are you might be new to multi-rotor helicopters, also known as drones. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of how multi-rotor helicopters fly, what it is that gives them control. It's not immediately obvious the way it is with an airplane, the wings and the tail and all that stuff. So we'll interject a little bit here and there as we go, but for now, let's get the software going. And also, before we do the software, this is the package that the software comes in. It comes in a compact disc format. Inside, there's an instruction book. And while the instruction book looks like there's a bunch of pages in there, it's only about the first 5 pages in English. And then it also has German, let's see, English, it's the first 5 pages, then German, French, and Italiano. Okay? I would have expected to see Spanish in there, but I think a Spanish person could mutter through the Italian. Is there Spanish? No Spanish. German, English, French, and Italian. Okay. And then on the back, that's called keyboard mapping, typical with flight simulator software packages. They give you the keyboard shortcuts if you want to do that while you're flying, if you're sitting close enough to your keyboard. The nice thing about simulators, flat panels that we have in our houses for televisions and stuff, nowadays with an HDMI connector, it makes it really easy to just take your laptop, run the software there. Most laptops are powerful enough to do these things these days. Put an HDMI cable into your big flat panel, turn up the volume, sit on the sofa with a beer or a cup of coffee or something, and fly your sim on this big format television display. And then when you're doing that, the keyboard commands aren't as easy because chances are the laptop or the keyboard isn't close by, but having the ability to control the software from the controller that you're using to do the flying, that's pretty handy. So anyway, so it comes as a compact disc. Directions are inside the case for the disc. And let's talk about the computer requirements real quick. We don't have to rush through this. We have an hour at least. We can go 5 hours if we wanted to, although I'm going to shoot for about an hour. 5 hours doesn't really appeal to me, frankly. So anyway, basic features that come from, this is the marketing department's addition to the product listing at towerhobbies.com. That's where I pulled this. And Tower Hobbies carries all of Hobbyco branded products or distributed products. So 15 different drones come along with the software. Different photography platforms, including a quad, a hexacopter, and an octocopter. There's 20 flying sites, so you're not just limited to one generic flying field like the AMA club, like the typical, AMA club with the little gazebo in the background and some parking area. There's actually 20 different flying sites, and in each of those flying sites, I would imagine once we get this set up, we'll see. I haven't used it yet. I installed it to make sure that the computer would take it okay, and just to see how long it would take to install, to make sure it would work within the format of the show. So I haven't seen any of this stuff yet, but I would imagine 20 flying sites, there's going to be some interesting stuff if you want to fly around, take pictures, fly in between fence posts, underneath tents, stuff like that. Let's see. The physics is specific for multi-rotor helicopters, which is cool. That should help it fly. The earlier versions of multi-rotor helicopters within RealFlight didn't fly very well. Regular single-rotor helicopters flew great. In fact, that was how I learned when I started with my first helicopter. I was flying the Huey, I think, on RealFlight 3.5, and that's how I learned helicopter basics. So this says multi-rotor physics, so that ought to be interesting to see. Reactive 3D objects, that means you can go tearing around and fly into stuff. Lighting is realistic, and RealFlight has pretty sophisticated software. They've refined this over the course of years. So lighting, weather, the physics are very good. So I would expect this to be much of the same. There's a reset button on the transmitter, which means you just press a button and it takes you back to whatever you had for a preset start point. No batteries for the flight controller, which is very good. I took it out of the box. The first thing I did was try to pop it open so I could throw some double A's in there. And I looked at the instructions, and sure enough, it uses USB power. So that's similar to the other one. I don't know why I thought batteries would be required. All software functions can be controlled through the controller, which is nice. And we already pointed out the trainer jacks, so you can set it up with a second controller. System requirements, some of you are going to scowl at this, but it needs Windows. What's the one after XP? Windows, I forget. It's right here. Vista, that's the one. Windows Vista or higher. So it's not compatible with Windows XP, and it's not compatible with Macs. They also say it's not compatible with Windows emulators like you have on Macs. I think I have Parallels, or no, I have VM Fusion. VM Fusion on my Mac. So it says it's not compatible. It says you need 512 megabytes of RAM, 3 gigs of hard drive space, and a DVD drive to install the software. That's pretty much it. It's all typical stuff. If your computer doesn't have this performance, at least 2 gigs of RAM, if it doesn't have this stuff, then it might not work as well. And also, in the booklet, I noticed there's some troubleshooting recommendations. If your performance is not what you would expect, if you would expect the performance to be faster or smoother, you can turn down the intensity of all of the effects so that more of the processor is going towards the flying and the physics and less towards making the fence posts look real and the leaves on the trees look real, or the lighting, reflecting off of the grass just so. Okay, so if you turn down the intensity of the effects, it makes the flight physics more realistic, or it allows them to run in real time if you're having stuttering or problems. Last thing to mention is that the flight controller has, let's switch cameras again just to keep it interesting. The flight controller, most of us that fly these multi-rotor helicopters, the throttle stick, if you're using an airplane controller, the throttle stick will have a ratchet effect where it moves a little. Every time you move it, it's a click. Okay? This comes out of the box smooth, which is going to be typical for your helicopter controllers, okay? And that's what you want for a multi-rotor helicopter. You want a smooth throttle because if you're trying to hover, it's entirely possible that the exact spot that you want is in between two clicks. And if you're trying to do different things, if you are monitoring a camera feed, that little ratchet effect can really mess you up. So it comes with the ability to swap this back to a ratcheting throttle, but I don't know of anybody that's ever flown a smooth throttle that actually went back to a ratchet. Usually airplane guys will fly, or girls, will fly with the ratchet with their airplane, fly their whole time in the hobby with the ratchet. And then if they go fly a helicopter or a multi-rotor helicopter, when they go to a smooth throttle, they never go back to a ratcheting throttle. So this comes with a smooth throttle. You just want to leave it like that. Okay, so let's get the software going. You'll see on this computer, we've got it ready to go. I already went ahead and put the disk in just to skip that little delay in getting access to the disk drive. So this is what happens. If your computer's set up for autoplay, which it probably is, you put the disk in, and the first thing that you're going to see is that this is going to pop up. So you just run the setup. And if I follow the instructions, it's going to say, click Run Setup. And I'm going to keep talking about things that I might have skipped over. But it says, do you want to let this happen? You say yes, of course. And once this starts installing, we'll talk about a few different things. RealFlight Drone. They should have quotation marks around drone. That's just a personal preference, but here we go. Okay, so it's starting to install. Now, when it comes to the company that makes this, they're called Knife Edge Software, and they have a pretty active website. You can go there. People make their own helicopter models. Also with the airplanes, people make their own airplane models. They make custom covering schemes. They increase or decrease the size of the stock airplane. You can adjust all of the parameters. You can change the size of the wing, the center of gravity, the power of the engine. And people will take those models that they've customized, they'll save them, give them a new name, and upload them. So they have a very active support network at the website. And that website is www.knifeedge.com. So it's KNIFEEDG.com/forums. All right, and that's where their support network is. We'll also be discussing this at multi-rotorforums.com. I'll be flying it. Now, one of the things you don't get with this software that they have with RealFlight 7.5 is the multiplayer capability. We do that at giantscalenews.com, the other website that I run. And what will happen is late at night somebody will post that they're opening up a server at RealFlight, and people will log on with their RealFlight 7.5 software at home. They'll join a server that's already in operation, and you can have 8, 10, 12 people flying, and it's like being at a flying club, except everybody's on crack the way they fly when they're there doing this. So you can do multiplayer. So I would expect Knife Edge software being how they are, where they're constantly developing and improving things, releasing new versions. Eventually, RealFlight Drone will have racing. They already have a scavenger hunt. They'll have better flying sites for people that want to do proximity flying, in and around trees, through abandoned buildings, whatever. You could do all sorts of stuff with that. You know, Halloween just passed. It'd be cool to have proximity flying through like an abandoned mental hospital, something Halloween themed. But I would imagine they'll also add multiplayer for multi-rotors so that you could have FPV racing, right? Wouldn't you want to be able to go online and do like an organized race of 6 or 8 people around a course? So I would expect that to come out in the future. Right now they don't have it, but hopefully at some point in the future they will. But knifeedge.com/forums is where you can find a lot of additional information and assistance if you need it. Also, going through their manual here, if you fly in another part of the world, you might have a different standard for the controller. Here in the US, we fly mode 2, which means on the left, we have throttle, rudder, left and right, roll, and then pitch, okay? And if you're totally brand new to this, you might not know what that means, but we will discuss it in due time. But you can switch this to mode 1, which I believe, actually I'm not sure what mode 1 is. It's crazy. I can't even think of it. It's so like off the wall, but people fly like that. I think it might be rudder and elevator on one stick, or elevator and throttle. I don't know. It's different though. Just goes to show what the human mind is capable of. People are flying these other modes, and it's crazy. It's like the old Norton motorcycles, or were they Nortons? Triumphs that had the throttle and the clutch and everything on opposite hands. You try to ride one of those today, you'll kill yourself. So don't forget, if you get the software, once it's installed, you'll have updates periodically, and there's also something of a wiki where they have troubleshooting and known problems with solutions explained, and that's at gpsoftware.com. Okay, so that might help also. So let's see, installation is coming along. It's just about there. It's just a few. Okay, now it's doing another one. This stuff that's being installed between the fields, the different aircraft, it's a lot of stuff. It's not a very small software package. It's got a lot of features, and it works really well, so it's worth the wait. Getting close. Getting close. And there we go, it's in. So just a couple minutes. Now it needs Microsoft DirectX version 9.0C. And I'm going to do what any normal person would do. I'm not even going to read it really, and just click OK. Here, I accept the agreement. Why not? Next. Installing. Now this computer that it's installing on is a probably 2 to 3 year old HP laptop. It's got 2 gigs of RAM, and it's running Windows 7. And it's here just for the studio so that we can do Skype calls. If you have a much faster desktop, especially if it's geared towards gaming with video accelerators and all that stuff, it's going to install more quickly, and it's going to boot up and run more quickly. So what you're seeing tonight is probably minimum performance as far as the installation and how it's going to run. And just real quick, let's go to the website real quick and just look at a couple of more things before we start the software. So this is RealFlight's website, and this website is at realflight.com, RealFlight.com. And when this video, this show, gets archived to YouTube, I'll list all the different websites that I've mentioned. And that'll be right below where the video box is at YouTube. So this is realflight.com/drone, and this is their homepage for the drone simulator product. And if you scroll down, you can see it's about $130 US, and that's with the controller. And just gives you some highlights of what's involved. One of the really nice things is being able to record your flying and then play it back, so you can see what might have made it better, what might have worked better. You can simulate aerial media production. It does have an FPV. You can see right here an FPV feature. There's a scavenger hunt challenge, they call it. That's exciting. Here's the different aircraft. I think this Gowie is going to be fun. It's probably a wobbly goblin to fly compared to all the stuff we're flying now. But back in the day, this thing was hot. A lot of people were flying these. I never quite got to this. Right about when I was going to buy one of these, after starting with a microcopter, I thought this thing is too intense. I need something that I can fly for fun and develop some skills. And I almost bought a Gowie 550 kit, but then X Aircraft came out with the X650, so I bought that instead. So here's the dead cat. And let's see, there's some funky looking octopus one. I'm not sure that's actually a model of a real thing, or if that was a late night at the RealFlight Studios when they put that one together. This might be the Hubsan quadcopter, I'm not sure. And then there's just some other generic looking ones. This one looks like it might be, what, DroidWorks maybe, with those arms. I'm sorry, Aeronavics. There's a TBS Disco style frame. And one of these, the Voltage. I'm not sure who makes that. I thought it was, I can't see the label. I'm not familiar with that one. It's probably a Hobbyco product if I had to guess, but I'm not familiar with it. I think that's a 3D capable quad. And then also it points out that once you pay for this, once you own it, you can upgrade to RealFlight 7.5. You click here, you get the full details of that package. And I believe the upgrade, I wrote it down, but here it is. It's $50 to get the full package. And again, that adds multiplayer, which by itself is worth it, because when you can go online and do flying with friends, people that you might know from multi-rotorforums.com, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so getting back to our installation of the software, let's go ahead and click on this, and it's going to ask for registration information, which I'm sure I have here somewhere. On the back of the disc, I think we need two things. We need, always click yes. We need the registration for the software, which is going to be on the back of the case. You could see it right there. I shouldn't have held that up because now everyone's going to copy it. And then there's a registration also on the back of the controller. Okay, so you're going to need both of those to get the software up and running. So for the, let me just switch this so I don't get any complaints from the folks at Hobbyco for showing my serial number. So the serial number is, we'll skip over the DS. Okay. Now for the controller, let's see. All right, so the OK button activated, so it must like what I entered. Okay. Now, before you run, or before you press the button, if this is like RealFlight 7.5, which I guess it is, you have to plug in the controller first. So let's go ahead and do that. Plug it in back here. And I'm just going to step away for 1 second. I just want to make sure, if I had to guess, my good friend, hang on right back. Because I'm here by myself, it's hard to know for sure, because I'm not monitoring the stream, it's hard for me to know for sure if the stream is actually live and working. I'm assuming it is, because the indications on the monitor here would show me if it crashed. But it's hard to know for sure, excuse me, being by myself in the studio, if the stream is actually working. We tested it about an hour ago. Scott Norton, Moto Preserve, from the website, helped me out with that. We checked Skype functionality, we checked the functionality of the stream, and everything was working great, so I'm assuming everything's going now. I was just checking to see if Scott might have texted me to say, it's not working. All right, so got the controller plugged in, and we're going to run the software. And let's see what happens. Now, the menu items that you have up here, simulation has to do with the parameters surrounding the software, weather, the controller, environment. Actually, environment probably has the flying sites. Actually, it probably has the weather, the time of day, those kinds of things. Aircraft is obviously a different aircraft, but we'll go through each of these one by one. So the default flying site is Flight School HD. And you can see all the different elements of the flying site being loaded. And this is a typical startup time for RealFlight. There's a lot of things that get put into action each time it's loaded. So it's telling me right off the bat, it's giving me an alert. You have not yet calibrated your controller. Please choose Select Controller from the Simulation menu and click the Calibrate button for your device. Anybody that's built one of these helicopters, you know that calibrating your controller, calibrating your ESCs, they're necessary steps, and the simulator is the same way. So we'll go to Simulation, select Controller. So this is the Interlink Elite. That's what comes with it. I don't have to edit it, but I am going to calibrate it. So it says center all controls, which I'm going to do. And that just means including this throttle stick. Including this throttle stick. I'm looking at it backwards on the monitor. Including this throttle stick, everything has to be centered to start out. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll click Next. It says move both sticks up, down, left, and right to their extents, which that means all the way to opposite corners, opposite ends. Exercise all switches and knobs as well. Make sure you move each control to both extremes. So everything on the control, everything on the transmitter needs to be moved around. So I'm just going to show you as I do that. Okay, so I'm going to take the sticks, both sides. I'm going to go left, right, up, down. I go in circles, back and forth. And as you're doing this, you can see on the screen that little monitor, that controller monitor is showing movement of the sticks, indicating that what you're doing with the sticks is also being picked up by the computer. And you don't have to do it as many times as I just did it. You can maybe do a range 2 or 3 times like that, and it still works. Okay? And then each of the switches, knobs, let's see, this one. Okay, there's no levers on the back of the controller like some radios have, and that's it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 auxiliary controls in addition to your main, your 2 sticks with those 4 channels. So let's go ahead and click Finish. And OK, and we're ready to go. Now, let's just go through the menus real quick. For simulation, graphics, use the slider to adjust the quality of RealFlight's visual presentation. And that's what I said earlier. You could make the graphics more intense if you've got a more powerful, faster computer, or you could slide this back. this little slider here to low, or mine's set to medium. I'll just leave it there for now. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow more processing power to be used for the flying than it is for making things around you look pretty. Mute, unmute audio settings, capture screenshot, which is cool. Mute, unmute audio. We don't want to disable that. We want to have audio. Okay. As far as aircraft goes, select aircraft, self-explanatory. It's going to come up with a menu that you can choose from. So here's the list. Sometimes when you click on these, they open up a little drop down. There might be a couple that you can select from. So I just clicked on one, but I actually want to choose Helimax. That's the one that we saw before. And I just want a basic quad. That's, of course, now my experience with these things, I'm getting like I have a preference. All right, that looks fun. That's fine. We're going to use this airport, the sun, the wind. We're not going to change any of that stuff. Challenges. Let's just see what the challenges are. Fly a challenge-only version of the Quadcopter X through the courses of gates and touchpads. Scavenger hunt. Find designated airport objects using your FPV quadcopter. Hold it steady to take a picture of each one. Okay, that might be fun. Gadgets. Let's see. Flight modes. Radio. Binocular. What does binocular do? I guess maybe it gives you a close-up view, like a zoomed-in view. Viewport. Let's see what the different views are. Chase, that's as if you're flying behind it. Oh, that's the gimbal view. That's kind of cool. Fixed, which is from a fixed position on the ground. So you're going to look at the helicopter as if you're doing line of sight flying. And then the nose, this I believe is your FPV position. Flying as if you're looking out through the nose of the helicopter. Let me just see if there's any other explanation for that. Okay, we'll look into that later. And there is a help thing here, which I'm sure you could put in any of these things and it would explain them fully. But I am going on the fly now, read the manual later mode of operation. And let's just see how it flies. So, looks like the motors are turning. If I give it some throttle, yeah, it flies. Yaw left and right. All right, little nose in. So, let's just look and see real quick. Environment, let's see if there's any wind. Okay, there it is down there. So the wind direction is now 105 degrees. And if we want to change the intensity, that's page up and page down. So let's just hit those keys and see what we have. Page up, 1 mile per hour for, let's make it 5. 5 miles an hour is a little bit of a breeze. That way we can see if it drifts a little bit as we're flying. And if that runway right there is runway 9, well, let's see which way it drifts. So the wind's a little bit, so this helicopter's set up. You can see the camera tilting, which is kind of cool. And if we open up that viewport, let's see, I think P, no, that doesn't work. Let's see, gadgets. Viewport. There's the fixed view. That's as if you're standing on the ground. That's the nose as if you're flying FPV. Now that's not going to tilt, I would think. As we're tilting the camera, that nose position, that's like having a fixed camera on the front of the helicopter for FPV or for the pilot view if you're flying with a two-man rig. There's chase, that's from a position behind the helicopter, and there's the gimbal view. So if I tilt the gimbal, it's going to tilt just like it would with any camera gimbal. So you have, that would be the second operator's view if you were operating as a two-man crew. Or if you're just a one-man crew and you're looking through your goggles and looking at the camera, then that's what you'd be seeing. But let's go through this. And there's the nose view. And you know, I could see this being equally appealing to people that just want to learn to fly. They want to get some basic flying skills before they mate in their first helicopter. But I could also see it being appealing to people that have never really flown these before, and they want to. Now this is a stabilized flight mode. Loiter mode is probably looking in that upper right corner. Oh, the arm flew off. I can't wait to see. Hang on. I can't wait to see the first person that makes a video of this and gets it picked up by a news station as an actual video and punks the TV station. Not that I'm giving you that idea, but oh, this is too funny. Some news person is going to report this like it's a real crash. Helicopter crashed into the control tower at the local airport today, and it's going to be, anyway, it's going to be from RealFlight. So we're looking at this, and so far it looks cool, but let's find a different helicopter now that we can fly. And the camera gimbal spazzing out on the ground over here. And then up here, you know, you have that viewport view, but then you also have, let's see, the zoom type, no, zoom in, zoom out. Look at my aircraft camera position. I'm just looking to see if you can make the whole screen go to FPV. So now we've crashed, right? And we knew that was happening. I flew it right into the control tower. So what you do is, I'm going to press this button right here. This is the reset button. And when I do, it's going to take me right back to where we started. So here I go. I'm pressing the button. There's my pickup truck. I left it running in the parking lot. Wasn't sure how long I was going to be able to fly. So I press the reset button. If you press it and hold it, it goes into rewind mode. That's just like RealFlight 7.5. If you press it once and release it, what it did was, and I just bonked it on the ground. In fact, if I roll it over, if I crash, okay? So there it is, crashed on the thing. If you have to bring the throttle to 0 first, and press the reset button. I don't know why it's resetting to a point that's up in the air. Oh, you know why? Because I pressed the P button to pause it. That's what happened. The P button, I just remembered. P with RealFlight is actually, it resets that start position. So I pressed the button when it was flying around before, and where it was when I pressed the button, that's where it's going to go to now. Where I was when I pressed the P button on the keyboard is where it's going to go when you press the reset button. So what I have to do is reset this to get it to where it's not 2 feet off the ground about to crash, because each time I do that, each time I press the reset button, instead of being able to fly, instead of having it sit there, it's going to just keep crashing. Which some days it feels like this. It feels like you fly and you crash. And you put some batteries on there, you change some props, you fly and you crash. You have days like that. But yeah, P, what's the official name for the P button? Remember aircraft position. So that's what that does. So let's change the aircraft. what do we have here? Okay. And that's that, like I said before, TBS Discovery type format. It's going to take a minute to load. And I just want to see how we change the flight modes, which switch that is. It looks like it's this top left corner. So stabilize mode. I don't know if it's in this book. This book is very brief, meant to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So I'll have to go online after this episode to see exactly what those different flight modes are. But, you know, like any multi-rotor helicopter, it's probably got different modes. One where there's a minimum amount of help, which would be like a manual mode, where the helicopter doesn't try to auto-level itself. And this stabilize, you can see the helicopter by bringing it in a little closer. Normally we don't recommend flying right in front of your face like this. But you can see if I roll to the right and I let go, the helicopter goes back to level by itself. You see that? That's typically called like here it's called stabilize. A lot of times it's just simply called auto level. There's other flight modes that are a lot more challenging where if you roll like that and you let go, it stays at that attitude. Okay? So, can I fly and talk at the same time? I'm not sure. But there's all sorts of stuff out there that you can hit. Those runway lights, let's see. Probably run into those. Whoa, throttle's a little touchy. Yeah, so you can bounce off the runway lights. Probably broke a prop. And what's interesting, see how it's flying around, it's all flopping around? RealFlight software has progressive failures. So what happens is, like I just ran into that runway light fixture. I probably broke a prop. And now the helicopter is just kind of flailing around because even though it's sustained damage, it doesn't end the flight. And you can see that now it's upside down and the motors are still running. So RealFlight has kind of a progressive damage mode, or not mode, but it's built into the software where you could have a little bit of damage and keep flying. With the airplanes, you could be flying a biplane, knock a wing off, and you keep flying. And as far as simulation goes, they might have it as a future mode, but challenges, no, they don't have it. Let me just go to software. I just want to keep the Skype page up in case somebody does call. We didn't promote this show at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get any Skype calls. Although if somebody does want to call, it's Drone Radio Live 2. And if you're just tuning in, the reason I'm sitting here in front of a bunch of moving blankets is because we're using this second episode as another opportunity to do a dry run, make sure the software is working, make sure we're streaming to the internet, make sure our live stream is stable, the studio equipment's all working the way it's supposed to. So what we did tonight was we turned around the cameras so I could sit here, run the software for this review, and that's why behind me we have moving blankets and storage, because this isn't the normal view that the studio was made for. But we made it work for tonight so we could talk about RealFlight Drone, a new product from Hobbyco, released and distributed by Hobbyco. It's developed by Knife Edge Software. Okay? So what I was just looking at was, and this is a feature of RealFlight 7.5, the ability to have system failures. And I don't see it in the settings. And what will typically happen is with airplanes, you'll be flying along and the rudder will hard over in one direction. Or the motor will fail, or you'll go to take off and your ailerons will be backwards or something like that. So let's just look through this real quick and see if we have the ability to trigger failures. It would be a challenge, but it's not there. Heads-up display, that would be like an OSD. Camera position, look at camera type. Ah, there we go. That's what we want. If you go to View, Camera Type, Nose, that's like a dedicated FPV. And that's, if you've ever flown any other simulators, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, that's, the default is the cockpit view because you're flying it like a full-scale aircraft. So that's FPV. So what you could do with this is you could set it to the nose camera position and go flying around. And this is like flying FPV. And what's interesting about a helicopter when you're flying FPV is that you could be pointed this way and flying, but then get a little sideways, and next thing you know, you're pointing out here somewhere, but you're actually flying sideways or just out of whack, and the way you fix that is just with a little bit of rudder control. So overall, I mean, we're flying it. It does fly like a multi-rotor helicopter. The physics, I don't know if it feels exactly like the helicopters that I've flown, but it certainly flies well enough to allow myself to practice. I'm trying to click on those with the mouse when it's actually the thing here. I would think loiter mode is like a GPS mode. But, so yeah, this would certainly give you the ability to practice. It would certainly give you the ability to learn. And I'm trying to come down. I've got the throttle at idle. Does it fly exactly like a helicopter, like a multi-rotor helicopter? Yes, it flies exactly like one, and the controls are all the same. The physics feels very close, but if you're out there flying your own day in and day out, you would have fun with this, but you'd say it doesn't feel exactly like my helicopters do. But if it's snowing outside, if it's 20 degrees and it's windy, I think this is pretty darn good. Because with this, you could practice, you could do things that you can't do at the field. You could buzz that stupid airplane with your helicopter. And then come back and give it some more before you run into the tent. Now, yeah, see, that's progressive failure right there. The motors are still turning, but I must have broke the prop when I hit the tent. So it's going to flip me over. Cool. All right, so we'll press the reset button. If anybody has a phone call via Skype, I know probably nobody's watching, but Drone Radio Live 2. Okay, you can call in anytime. It's now 7 minutes to 10. We've been doing this for a little over 50 minutes. I'm going to go for about another 5 or 10 minutes. If we don't get a phone call, I'm going to wrap it up. So let me just fly another helicopter here. So far, it looks like the stream is fine. I'm going to check to make sure the show archived properly, and then we will plan our next show. So let's leave it in FPV mode. I'm not going to bother playing around with camera modes. I'd like to get a flight mode that's more manual. And when I say manual, that's like I said before, you have auto level where the electronics within the helicopter, the gyros, the accelerometers are helping you to stabilize or to keep the helicopter stable. And when you switch some of that assistance off, the helicopter gets a little, not a little, depending on how it's set up, it's going to become harder to fly, but you're going to have a lot more control. So that if you want to lean it into a turn, it'll go in and you can hold it there without, you know, every time you lighten up your pressure on the stick, the helicopter's not fighting you to try to get back to level. So what's nice is you get in manual mode, you fly around, you can just use real soft finesse touch on the sticks, and the helicopter's not constantly fighting you, trying to do opposite of what you want it to do. When you're just starting out, GPS position hold, which would be, let's see, let's go back to this. GPS position hold means the helicopter's built-in GPS system is trying to hold a position. And What it allows you to do is, let's put the helicopter back down on the ground. Let's change the view to fixed. Okay. So there's the helicopter sitting over in the grass, and we're in altitude hold, but we want loiter, which I'm guessing is like a position hold. So what I can do is, I can't really see it where it is. Yeah, let's bring it back. So what you could do is you could take the helicopter, right? And we know the helicopter has GPS because it's got that little antenna sticking up. That little white disc is a GPS antenna, okay? So what you could do is put the helicopter in GPS position hold. So right there is where it's going to want to stay. You just give it some power and let it float up into the air. Now, you might not have ever flown one of these before, so you just hit the yaw and you let the helicopter turn around. You get a feel for, one of the initial things that you're going to learn is how much of a response do you get for a certain amount of stick input. And once you see that pushing the stick a little bit makes it yaw slow and pushing it all the way makes it yaw faster, that's yaw when it moves in that direction, left or right. When you first learn that, that's something. And then when you learn to roll left and right, I think I'm flying nose in. Yeah, like that. When you yaw right or when you roll left, you know how much control, how much response you get from the helicopter for those stick inputs. That's how you learn. But what's going on with this mode is I can fly it around. And when I let go of the sticks, it immediately takes that position and wants to stay there. So if you're flying around and you're learning and you get all dorked up, right? You can just give it some throttle, let go of the sticks, let it pop up to a safe altitude, not too high, and the position hold is going to get it level, it's going to stay in one position, and you can kind of gather yourself. So it's a nice aid to learning, but the trick is you don't want to learn and stay in that mode because you become very dependent on the GPS and you really don't learn to fly. You just learn to mash the helicopter around, which isn't what we encourage people to do, especially at multi-rotorforums.com. We want you to learn what the equipment does, how it works. We want you to learn to fly, and that's going to save your helicopter. It might keep you from hurting somebody one day when all of the automation fails and you have to actually fly it to the ground without hitting people or property on the ground. Okay, and that brings us to a little safety lecture. If you're going to start flying these, using the simulator is great. You can fly it into your head, as I just demonstrated, without getting hurt. But when you learn to fly these, please be sensible and responsible. Do not fly over people, over crowds of people, especially people that you don't know. People have a right to safety. You flying this over their head presents an unsafe situation. Don't fly over active roads. These can be a distraction to the drivers that might be driving by. They get distracted looking at the helicopter and they hit another car. People can obviously get hurt that way, so that's bad. So don't fly over people, especially people you don't know. Don't fly over active roadways. Don't fly near airports. Don't fly, certainly if you're flying out in what you think is a wide open area and you see a helicopter come trucking by, like a medevac or something, or a crop duster. They use helicopters for doing spraying of bugs, for crop dusting at times. Don't approach that manned aircraft with your little unmanned aircraft to try to get a video or a photo. Don't just give way. Come back to your takeoff spot and land. Don't be in the air when these things happen. But use common sense. Use common sense. Don't create a situation where you end up as an international news story, because what happens is the rest of us that are trying to be law-abiding, that are trying to use our helicopter equipment in interesting and creative and responsible ways, it puts a lot of pressure on the rest of us. So if you're new to this, this software is going to be a great aid. It's going to help you fly. You're not going to crash your equipment and have to spend lots of money making repairs before you really know what you're doing. But at the same time, if it does give you the skills to fly and you're able to get out there with your new helicopter, whether it's a Phantom, whether it's this Helimax Voltage, whether it's Hubsan, Unique, Solo from 3D Robotics, or any of the number of ready-to-fly quads that are coming out of China these days that are very cheap on the internet, be responsible. The most common problem is going to be flying over people that don't know who you are, don't know what you're doing, don't know the level of safety you operate at. They're going to complain. Flying over roads out in front of your house, if you live on a busy street, that's a bad idea. But enjoy them. Certainly take advantage. Let all of your creative juices flow, because these things are pretty amazing in what you can accomplish with them. But be responsible. Don't cause a problem that makes it hard on the rest of the community to be able to continue flying. Okay, so that's our video. We don't have any calls. Not a big surprise. Nobody's watching probably right now. But we'll archive this. It'll be on YouTube in the multi-rotorforums.com YouTube channel. If anything we discussed tweaked your curiosity, if you have questions, by all means, come to multi-rotorforums.com. I'm going to keep flying it. I'm sure people at the site, you know, some of the members at the site will be giving it a try, and we could discuss it there. But all in all, it's got FPV, you know, the ability to learn and practice FPV. It's got the ability to learn and practice aerial media capturing skills. And it's got the ability to teach you just in general how to operate these things safely. Okay? And to save you a lot of money, because a lot of people started out flying actual helicopters before simulators were more common, especially ones that are specific to multi-rotor helicopters, and spent a lot of money crashing. Okay? So that's it. Thank you for watching. I'm Bart from multi-rotorforums.com. This was Drone Radio Live, Episode 2. Today is November 4th, 2015. Bye-bye.